One of the key words in the criticism of Matthew Arnold is disinterestedness. He does not mean by it an art for arts attitude. The critic must be disinterested not because he has no social function but because he has one. Artist has some purpose. Writes with an aim in view. In his essay, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time, he makes this abundantly clear. The critic must keep himself aloof from the practical view of things. He must not lead himself to mere political and practical considerations. There is, to the shame of England, more than enough of this kind of criticism. The main critical organs are subservient to practical ends. The Edinburgh Review looks at everything from the point of view of the Whigs, the Quarterly Review from the point of view of the Tories, and the Times from the point of view of the common satisfied well-to-do Englishman. True criticism must be independent of these interests, or it will never attain real authority or perform its function of creating a current of true and fresh ideas. Only the critic who remains collected and refuses to be practical can do the practical man a service. Without disinterestedness, there is no possibility of truth and high culture. A high culture will come about only when the critic has prepared the way for the poet. In his study of poetry, Arnold claims the highest future of poetry. The future of poetry, he writes, is immense because in poetry, where it is worthy of its high destinies, our race, as times goes on, will find an ever surer and surer stay. There is not a creed which is not shaken, not an accredited dogma which is not shown to be questionable, not a received tradition which does not threaten to dissolve. Our religion has materialized itself in the fact, and now the fact is failing it. But for poetry, the idea is everything. The rest is a world of illusion, of divine illusion. Poetry attaches its emotion to the idea. The idea is the fact. The strongest part of our religion today is its unconscious poetry. We have seen many novel things claimed for poetry by criticism in the past, but Arnold claims more than any of them the battle for men's minds that is being waged by science and religion will be won by neither. Religion and philosophy, the shadows and dreams and false shows of knowledge will be replaced by poetry. Science itself will be completed by it. As Wordsworth said, poetry will be the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. If poetry is to have this supremely high place, the standards set for it must be equally high. The poetry in which the spirit of the people will find its consolation and stay must be excellent, sound, and true. In other words, only the best poetry can be admitted. This will be found to have a power of forming, sustaining, and delighting us as nothing else can. How can we find this poetry? First, says Arnold, Neither the historical or the personal approach will aid us. Both approaches are fallacious since both are liable to make us praise or dispraise for reasons that have nothing to do with poetry. We must have objective, not historical or personal standards. We must, in other words, have a measuring stick. Indeed, there can be no more useful help for discovering what poetry belongs to the class of the truly excellent and can do us most good than to have always in one's mind lines and to expressions of the great masters and to apply them as a touchstone to other poetry. If we keep lines of high poetic quality in our minds, they will be infallible touchstones for detecting the presence or absence of high poetic quality. As examples, Arnold gives lines from Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, and Milton. He forgets that he has told us in earlier essays that the highest poetic quality depends on selection and arrangement and offers his touchstones of a line or two as all that is necessary. These few lines, if we have tact and can use them, are enough even of themselves to keep clear and sound our judgment about poetry, to save us from fallacious estimates of it, to conduct us to a real estimate. Most readers will feel that Arnold has let himself be carried away. The lines he quotes from Hamlet's dying request to Horatio, "If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity awhile, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story," are admired by all. But does not a large part of this admiration depend on the fact that we know everything that leads up to them? Is it not wrong to demand as much from a few lines as Arnold does? Indeed, it is doubtful if anyone could feel what Arnold wants us to feel from the lines of Milton, and courage never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome. Apart from the context, any poetic quality in those lines is difficult to discover, certainly not the very highest poetic quality. With his taste for the classics, his relative blindness to later literature, and his desire for standards without being able to accept the old neoclassical rules, Arnold was forced to find something more concrete than an abstract expression of his preferences. It is a challenge he was brave enough to meet, and we can admire his courage even though we are forced to find his touchstones inadequate. Arnold's elevation of poetry to a higher rank than religion, philosophy, and science makes him very jealous of the amount of poetry he will admit to the highest position. The best poetry, he says, must possess in the eminent degree truth and seriousness. Poetry that does not have high seriousness is not truly great. By high seriousness, he means a moral excellence which is congruent with his own morality. Thus, he denies Chaucer a place in the first rank and complains of Burns because of his Scotch drink, Scotch religion, and Scotch manners. What Arnold likes, we like, but we will not always limit ourselves as he does, because we cannot help but feel that he narrowed poetry in attempting to exalt it. Yet, if poetry was to be a substitute for religion, he could do no other, and he has had followers, such American critics as Irving Babbitt and Paul Elmer More in the 20th century preached more the same doctrine as Arnold's under the title of the New Humanism.